Good morning and happy Wednesday. You are listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on K-Talk AM 630. Check out our new website, ktalkmedia.com, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Twitter is at KTKK. Those are our call letters. Facebook is K-Talk Utah. Check us out. Join the conversation. Tell us what you think about the show. Tell us what content you want more of. We are one of the three oldest talk stations in the nation, and I am so happy to be here and so proud to be part of the K-Talk family. This is Scott with Prepper Talk Radio. Shane is actually on a family vacation this week, so we miss him, Mr. Prepared guy over there. He's probably out there having fun. He's actually probably tuned in right now. He can't rip himself away too far from the station, so we appreciate him. This show would suck if it were just me every week, but I think we got a good show. Just bear with us today. Let me get through a couple of quick announcements. First of all, make sure you check out the new website, ktalkmedia.com. We've got more content, more news, weather. Weather today is actually looking pretty good. We also have really cool text ability now. So tell us what you think. You can vote. Let us know what your thoughts are, what's going on the content and everything else. Simply just text the word K-Talk to 727-888-2777 and click on poll. Remember, text the word K-Talk, K-T-A-L-K, to 727-888-2777. And we do that every day, so we'll have feedback for you guys on what we're hearing from you, as well as station changes based on the direction that you, the listener, want us to take. Excuse me. Holy smokes. So we got a fun show. Today, Paul's show just talked about food storage, and food storage is an absolute staple in preparedness. But it's not number one. Number one is planning. We're going to talk about the P's of preparedness today. The first thing and first and foremost, every time, you need to start putting together a family plan. So I want to hear your input today. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Please join in the conversation. We're going to be taking a lot of calls today. The number here is 801-254-5855. That's 801-254-5855. And this show would not be possible if it weren't for our sponsors and good friends over at Survival Medical. That's survival-medical.com. They're going to be at the Southtown Expo Center this weekend at the gun show. Check them out. You can see all of their products. Talk to the founder of the company. He'll be there explaining why their first aid kits are longer lasting and better built and tougher than nature. You'll get to see them firsthand, touch it, feel it, buy it, and make sure your family's a little bit better prepared. So let's get into our topic for the day, the P's of preparedness. And there's a lot of different ones you can think of. But number one, first and foremost, plan. I find all too often people think, oh, I've got my food storage, I'm good. Or, oh, my family, we went through this training a few years ago, so we're good. That's all bunk. There's a lot more involved than you realize. And a lot of people that I talk to, they've got some of it. Actually, a lot of them have all of it prepared. They've got everything figured out. They've got all their plans, their backup plans, and they're working on training with their family to make sure everyone's consistent and understands what to do in case of different types of scenarios. For example, number one thing you're going to have a disaster with here in Utah, surprisingly, is actually flooding basement, broken pipes. Winters are cold. When the winters get too cold, if the house goes vacant for a week or two and the heat goes out, oftentimes that happens during a holiday break, you're going to have a basement flood. So what do you do? How does your family respond in those scenarios? Do you have magnets on the fridge with the proper companies to call to help with the cleanup? You're going to have mold issues and other problems if you've let it sit for a while. So you want to make sure you get things done correctly. And so I always say put pen to paper and put together a plan for each of your scenarios that your family's going to face. For example, when you go on a vacation, when you go on a trip, make sure you have all of your emergency contact list, both at your home, even if you're not there, and with you. And the reason I say that is because hopefully you've got someone checking on your house while you're gone. And if something does happen, they know who to contact because you've got that list posted for them. And you've gone through it before you've left. Now, personally, what I like to do is I like to have my list digitally, but I also like to print it out. My wife is the queen of organization in our family, and so when we go traveling, she has all of our itineraries printed She has all of our tickets printed, and she actually won't give them to me until it's time to get on the plane or time to board. But she has it. She kind of controls that and keeps that secure, and that helps her keep her sanity. For me, I need my sanity by having my emergency kits. Last time I took an flight, I packed my carry-on bag with a lot of my 72-hour kit supplies, one of those being a food ration block. And let me tell you, it was the funniest thing going through the line. This guy checking my bag had probably never seen one of these, and he kept looking at it, and he went and got his manager, and he asked his manager if this was safe, and the manager looked at it and was like, "Really, dude? That's food. He's fine." And just let me go through. But the first guy was actually quite nervous looking at this food product because he had no clue what it was. So it's kind of fun to freak people out that way. But the key here that I'm trying to get to is make sure you're planning. We went on a trip to Hawaii. I planned that in Hawaii, yeah, there's a lot of good food sources there, but I don't know how to hunt the different animals there. I don't know what the process is for different things, and you're locked in there by water. So what are my options, really? What about water filtration? So I always take a water filter with me when I travel. In this case, I took a bigger water filter. I took food rations. I took first aid kits. Took 2 of those, one for my wife's bag and one for mine. But it all comes down to planning. So I have a checklist that I like to use before I go on a trip and make sure I have all the things that I need to feel safe and secure in case of an accident or in case of an emergency. Join in the conversation. Feel free to give us a call and let us know what you do in your planning, whether it's planning for disasters or planning for small events that if disrupted could affect your family. Give us a call at 801-254-5855. Part of that planning is simply talking about with your kids possibilities of a fire in your home, possibilities of a flood, possibilities of an electrical outage. Those are some of the 3 more likely things to occur here in Utah. And so considering power outages, what is your plan? What is your family plan? First and foremost, I want you to think of, if the heat were to go out, what would you do to keep your family warm? What would you do to keep your house warm so that your pipes don't freeze and everything starts to break? Because you got to think about that as well. One of the simplest things is a wood-burning stove. Now they've got bans and restrictions on when you can burn wood and when you can and can't. But honestly, in a survival scenario, those things go out the window. No police officer is going to say, "I'm sorry, you can't burn wood today because there's a ban." If the entire neighborhood's out of energy, if nobody has power to their home, they're going to allow you to do that. The other part of that is making sure you've got a well-documented plan for everyone in the family and that it's posted. For example, growing up, we had evacuation routes for our house in case of a fire and where the family was going to meet. That wasn't just talked about, it was actually posted in our house. We had it in the kitchen, in the pantry. So you open up the pantry cupboard, and there on the wall was a plastic sheet, and inside that plastic sheet was a piece of paper that talked about where we're going to go in case of an emergency, and it had all the emergency phone numbers on there as well. So in case of fire, we're going to meet at this location. It was a light post across the street, and just up the street about 3 houses. And that way my parents could get an account of where everybody is, make sure everybody's okay. But then we also talked about fire safety, how to check your door handles, how to check and maintain the right processes so you can get out of the house correctly and safely, so that you're not breaking through a window and cutting yourself on the way out, but that you know how to use a window and that you've practiced it. And so we do drills. Now, we didn't do the drills very often. Most of the time it would go a year or 2 years between each drill, but we still tried. And that made my family a little bit better prepared than most of the kids I knew, because they weren't practicing anything. So my challenge to you is put together plans. Put together the plans for your family, specifically for floods in your home, for a fire, for power outage, and then the big one, the earthquake. Now you may think those aren't going to happen. If that's you and you think those will never happen to you, good luck. You've been warned. This is your warning call. But make sure you try to take some time to get those things taken care of. Now, one of the other things that I want to make sure we point out is don't just keep those digitally. Print those out. Make a binder. Make 2 binders. My family has 2 different binders. And we try to print those off on waterproof paper so that you can actually keep the ink on the paper, and that even if there's a flood, you can use those. But always have those printed out. We actually have a caller. Let's bring him on. Hey, thanks for calling. You're on the air.
Hey, I was wondering if you'd have suggestions for alternative communication should cell phones go out.
That's a really great topic. There's a few different choices. Some people like the small two-way Motorola radios. Problem with those is they've got a range issue. You can only go so far, and they're typically 5 miles, unless you're up skiing, and then they seem to do a lot better. But in town, there's a lot of disruption to the two-way radios. Tall buildings, all the different antennas, they're going to stop and slow that down. There's a couple really neat companies. One is GoTenna, and they can take your cell phone, and even though the cell towers aren't working, and they can make a closed network with your cell phones, almost like a two-way radio.
So like,
and that allows you to text, phone call, and there's a couple other features about it, but that gives you a 10-mile radius.
So it would be like phone-to-phone communication rather than through a tower.
Correct. And it works a lot like a handheld two-way radio. And that gives you a 10-mile radius. There's another one called Beartooth, and that does very similar technology, very similar product. But both of them have the ability that you can actually, it's kind of a dangle device that Bluetooth connects to your phone. So if you run out of power on your phone, you're fried. But it allows you to, as long as you've got that doggle device or dangle device, you can actually connect that phone to the other phones on that same network that you've configured. So you could have 3 or 4 phones, and everybody has access to that line. So if the cell towers go out or something disrupts those, or typically what's going to happen is there are going to be too many people calling at the same time so that you can't get through, this will allow you to bypass those.
Okay. Because one of the scenarios that we should be aware of is kids are at school, dad's at work, mom's shopping, and suppose there was an earthquake. Well, what's the meetup point? What are alternative places for kids to go or to meet up with parents and things like that? And if you're spread over a 10-mile radius, that can be difficult.
Absolutely. Another really good resource is ham radios. Now, doesn't really make sense for small kids to carry around a large ham radio, but I mean, first and foremost, you need to have a license for it, so you understand how to use it, how the bands work, and what bands you can and can't use, so that you don't interfere with police bands, you don't interfere with emergency medical responders. But I really love ham radios because it gives you that flexibility. You can actually talk a lot farther. They're line of sight radios, so if I have a strong enough output, I can actually communicate all the way across the valley. I can communicate across the state using repeaters, across the globe, all the way. I can bounce a signal to the moon and back. They're really phenomenal, but that's not always the simplest way for a family to stay in communication. Talking about an earthquake, say your kids are at school, say you're at work. My wife works from home. I work from home part of the time, but I'm also all over the state. I do a lot of driving. Sometimes I'm in Idaho, sometimes I'm in St. George. So if there were an earthquake to happen, I would have to scramble to get myself back to our meeting location. Without a good communication tool, we'd both be in the dark until I can get within range. So that's why I think ham for our family is the best solution. But I want to go back to your point, talking about an earthquake scenario for a family, kids are at school. I had a really good friend, or have a really good friend. She was actually Ms. Utah and Ms. America last year. Her sister and her sister's family were in Japan when Japan had their earthquake. And it was devastating. The kids drove about 30 minutes to get to school. Mom was at home with actually she was out shopping with one of the kids, close to home in walking distance. Dad was at work, and their oldest daughter was at school and just left to come home, and when the earthquake happened, so the bus route could no longer be taken, so all the kids were let off the buses to walk home. And so it took hours and hours for everybody to get home because it was, in some cases, a 10-12 mile hike. But their meetup point in that scenario was to meet up back at the house. So when someone got there, they had to sit and wait for everyone else. And the beautiful thing is everybody made it. Everybody got there, and once they got there, they knew what to do from there. I think that was the biggest key for them is they had that meetup point. So wherever that is, that's where people need to focus on. We're actually running into a break right now.
So Beartooth and GoTenna, right?
Yeah, Beartooth and GoTenna. Check them out. You can find them on Facebook or just Google them and you'll get them there.
Okay.
Thanks for your call. Hey, welcome back to Prepper Talk Radio here on K-Talk AM 630, the one of the last remaining free and independent thought radios. We're so excited to have you, the listener, be such a big part of what we do here at K-Talk Radio. Joining the conversation at 801-254-5855. Check out our new website, ktalkmedia.com. You'll be able to see the news, weather, all kinds of fun content that we're adding daily. Also, join in on the conversation through our text line, which is 727-888-2777. Text the word K-Talk, K-T-A-L-K, to that number and click on poll, and you'll be able to give us some more feedback on what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we can improve. As a reminder, today's show, as always, brought to you by the only first aid kits tougher than nature, Survival Medical. Check them out at local Sam's Clubs. Right now they're in Utah County in Orem, but they're also going to be at the Southtown Expo Center this Friday and Saturday, Sunday at the gun show. I believe it's Crossroads of the West. But it's $12 to get in. You'll have some savings on these kits. They're actually doing special show prices. Their kits are pretty awesome. I keep in my car the on the move pack. I also keep in my go bag or my bug out bag or my whatever you want to call it. I call it my get home bag. I keep it in my truck at all times because that's going to get me home in case my truck breaks down or in case something happens. But I keep the excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. I keep one of the outdoorsman kits, the ultralight backpacker kit, all the time in my bag. That way I can get home, take care of any incidents on the way or most incidents on the way, and be able to be a resource to my family. So today we're talking about the basics of preparedness. Number one, first and foremost, planning. We talked about communications a little bit, and I want to revisit that. Two really good tools or technology pieces for communication with your family. When the grid is struggling, say the cell phone system's just clogged, you can use Beartooth or Gotenna. Great products. Both of them turn your cell phone into more of a two-way radio, but it also gives you the text feature that a two-way radio does not give you. So great systems. They give you at least a 10-mile radius for those to work. Now those can be restricted. Any radio can be restricted by anything blocking its path. For example, if there's a lot of other frequencies going on, it can shorten your radius. If there's a lot of other antennas or buildings in the way, that can shorten your reach. So just be aware of that and kind of test and do your own research. Find out what works best for your family. Sometimes it's just a simple Motorola or other like devices that are two-way radios. You can get 4 or 5 of them on the same network and be happy. The other thing I want you to do is make sure you take your kids, take your family, spend some time understanding how to get home from where they spend most of their time. Now, with the kids, it's usually easier. They've just got to walk home from school. But what if they're used to busing and they never pay attention to the route? Great Saturday activity would be to drop them off with adult supervision and say, okay, how would you get home from here? And stay with them. Let them make all the decisions on how to get home and see how well they do that. But just take them to a point, one of the parents, jump out of the car with the kids and find your way home from there. See how well they do. Now, this is a great opportunity to also find out what they would do in other scenarios, like stranger danger, how they respond to a stranger approaching them. Great time, one-on-one time to really find out what your kids are thinking, what's going on in the world for them, and be a bigger part of their decision process as they grow and as they make their opinions. So get involved with them. Do fun things. Make emergency preparedness fun. It can seem boring. At times it can seem monotonous. A lot of people I talk to say it's a little scary and they get overwhelmed. The purpose behind this show is to help kind of break down those fears and give you a starting point. So the next thing I want to talk about, when we're talking about the P's of preparedness, and I like to keep things simple. So we've talked about plans. We've talked about paper. Print everything off. Make sure you've got hard copies of your plans, hard copies of your inventory of your goods and services, or not services, goods and supplies. Make sure this is the simplest one, pack rat. Keep the things on hand that you need, that you know you're going to need. The number one thing that's going to happen is you're going to lose a job. And that's going to put you out of an income, possibly 2 incomes, or depending on what your family situation is, it could put you out of income for a while. Make sure that you're quite a bit of a pack rat. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek. Don't just hoard everything. Don't become a hoarder. Be organized. Be strategic in what you're holding on to. Make sure you've got your food supply. Make sure you've got your water supply. More importantly, make sure you've got a water filtration system. Make sure you've got your survival medical first aid kits. I mean, these things will last you 20 years, and that's opening and closing it, using it over and over again. These are one of the longest sustainable first aid kits I've ever seen. It's the only one I've ever seen that gives you up to 20 years. Everything else is up to 2 years. So get one of those for each of the members of the family. Make sure you've got that. But get the things you need. And don't just get things. Get tools. And then focus on training. Make sure everybody knows how to use what you have and that you spend time doing it. It can be a lot of fun. One of my good friends, he takes his sons, and he doesn't have any daughters yet, but he takes them every month, and he does fire starting competitions to see who can create the best kindling, who can create a fire the fastest, and start a fire with sparks. They do flint and steel fire tests every month, and it's fun because he'll actually post them on Facebook and kind of show who wins. But it's a good thing to do is become a pack rat. Store ideas, store knowledge, store things that are going to help you get through the challenges. Another good thing is, what if the power goes out? What's your plan for that? We've got a backup generator, which is great. It's not a whole home backup generator, but it's a targeted generator. We can run a few lines from it. It allows us to run 4 electrical lines, 2 USB connectors, and so that allows us to run the lights and the energy that we need, keep our fridge and freezers going, keep a hot plate burning, so that we're not going without. Another thing is, you can check out, which is really cool, shelter solutions. Check out vitaldomes.com. They've got the best shelter, and they've also got a power system called the Home Grid 5000, which is what I'm saving up for right now. They start at just around $5,000, but you can actually unplug your dryer and plug this in where your dryer is, and it'll actually power your whole home. So that you don't need any expensive grid tie systems. You can actually just run this. It'll recharge itself typically within a day. As long as you're getting at least partial sunlight, those panels will recharge that whole system. Check it out. It's the Home Grid 5000. That's the system I'm going for. Right now I've got a dual fuel propane and regular gas generator. Benefit of that is I'll always be able to have at least one of those fuels accessible, and propane can store for a really long time. So make sure you've got a solution for when that power goes out, what you're going to do, and practice those scenarios. That's part of your plan. That's part of the pack rat. Make sure that you've got your plan and that you're actually hoarding the right things. I shouldn't say hoarding. Collecting the right gear, collecting the right tools and the right skills so that you can get through something. Now, I'm not an expert on everything. It'd be impossible for me to be such. I'm not an expert on everything survival. Again, that would be impossible for me to be such. So I'm looking for your comments, your content. You may be an expert in something or may have done extra studies. You probably have done extra studies in certain areas that make sense for you. So give us a call at 801-254-5855. We'd like to hear from you. I'd also love to hear what you're doing to be better prepared for your family, or maybe some life stories and what's happened in the past, so that you guys have been able to get through things. I can remember a time, because I had planned, I was able to get through a 3-month time of unemployment when I was living in California. Normally, a 20-something-year-old kid, if they lose a job, they're probably going to go back and live with mom and dad for a while to resettle and figure out what's the next step. Thankfully, I didn't have to do that. My parents taught me from a young age to make sure I always had at least a 3-month supply of food, at least a 3-month supply of finances, so that I can pay my bills and keep things going, so that I could survive those times. And so I had a 3-month time where I had no income. Thankfully, my bank account took care of that. Thankfully, I didn't have to go out every day and try to find a way to feed myself, because I had food and I had money set aside that it took care of me. However, had I gone more than 3 months, it would have been a problem. Thankfully, I found a job that started 3 months after I'd lost my last job, so I did not have to go without, and I had enough money in reserves that I was responsible with it, that I could get through and move forward. So make sure you're pack ratting the right things. Nowadays, I have the water filtration. I've got water barrels stored at my house, as well as you should. Don't store them in your old milk containers. Those don't store very well. Make sure you're using either, at the very minimum, a 2-liter bottle, especially the off-colored ones like the green. Those are my favorite for water storage for small quantities, but Get big water barrels. You can check those out. We've got a lot of different options. If you go to preppercon.com, you can see all those options for the different vendors that have come to PrepperCon, and you can see their products, and they're listed on our exhibitor page. But make sure you've got those solutions, because you're going to need a lot of water for, number one, hydration. That's much more important than having food. Number two, you're going to need it for sanitation, which is another one of our P's of preparedness, which is poop and pee. You got to make sure you can sanitize and do that in a place that's safe. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the hour. But make sure you've got a plan for these things. Make sure you've got the right resources so you can get through this. Preparedness isn't about just stockpiling a bunch of food and calling it good. Putting everything in your cold storage in the basement is a horrible, horrible, horrible idea. For example, what is the most secure room in any house? I want you to think about this for a second. Is it your family room? Is it your kitchen? Like, what has the least entries in and out? And what is the most fortified room in your house? I guarantee if you've got a cold storage, that is your most secure room in your house. It's like a vault. So if an emergency does happen, say it's an earthquake, how are you going to access that food if part of the house falls down around it? Do you have a generator strong enough and powerful enough to power your jackhammer that you may or may not have, so that you can get back into there and get your food store out? Most likely you won't have those options. So make sure you're storing your food in at least 2 different locations. I like to have some in the front room in the closet right by the front door. I also put my emergency kits close to the front door or near a window. I have a couple of them actually, so I keep one in the master bedroom. I keep one in the front room so I can grab that on my way out of the house quickly. I can also access the food from multiple locations. I've got some in the pantry, I've got some in the front room closet, I've got some in the basement. And that's my long-term food storage as well, not just my weekly rotating food, because you should ultimately be rotating your long-term food storage. Just because it says it's a 20-year shelf life doesn't mean it should be on your shelf for 20 years. You should be rotating that yearly, if not at the worst, every 5 years. The reason is typically within 5 years your food's not going to go bad, even storing it in non-ideal conditions. Now, everyone says ideal conditions, your food's going to last 20 to 25 years. There's some things that's going to stop that, even inside the packaging, or if it's improperly packaged. If moisture gets to, for example, the number 10 cans, those will rust out and it will spoil and ruin your food. Make sure you've got those in a dry, safe spot. Keep them off the ground, at least 12 inches off the ground, so that if flooding happens, it's not going to affect those cans. Same thing with your toilet paper. I can't tell you how many times I walk into somebody's home for a consultation. I find all the toilet paper stored on the floor in a room in the basement, and that room just happens to be adjoining to the drain in the floor by the furnace and the water heater. Well, if the water heater goes, it's going to get all over the place before it all goes down the drain. So make sure you've got all that stuff off the ground. If a pipe breaks in the winter, it's going to flood that floor. So make sure you've got all those things, all your survival gear, up off the floor so it doesn't get soaked and so it's not ruined right away. So make sure you're packing and planning and keeping all the right things that you need so that your family's better prepared. Now, this may also go without saying, but the next topic I want to talk about is people. Making sure all the people in your plan and all the people in your group are prepared, and making sure that all those people know their responsibilities when something happens. But also, as a point of security, making sure that you're not just telling everybody what you have and what you're doing. Otherwise, that becomes a threat to you. Now, the traditional prepper mindset is the first rule of prepping is you don't talk about prepping. Now, we're breaking that rule. The second rule of prepping is you don't talk about prepping. We're also breaking the second rule of prepping because that's what we talk about every week, every Wednesday, here on K-Talk Radio. That's what we focus on, is we want to help everybody get better prepared. Now, if you're talking to everybody, telling everybody what you have, they now know that your resources are their resources. It doesn't matter how well fortified or how well defended you think your home is. If you have multiple threats, they eventually will break you down and you will be in trouble. We'll just put it that way. Make sure that the people that you're talking to have the same mindset that you have, that they're both prepared and that they're both reserved and not telling everybody everything that you have. Sure, I've got goods and services, or not services, goods and tools and resources stocked up, but they're not all at home. They're also at different locations throughout the state and even outside of the state. But I do that so that I've got a backup plan, and as well as you should have one as well. Have a backup plan. Have a place where your family's going to meet after disaster, because it's a lot easier to survive in groups than it is on your own. Make sure that your in-laws are working towards a plan, and if they're not, maybe it's a good idea to start using this holiday season as an opportunity to help get them prepared. So instead of buying them tickets to that concert they want to go to, or that new T-shirt or jacket that they want, or an iPad, slip a little bit of money into a emergency food storage option for them. Get them a water filter. Get them some Mylar blankets and some wool blankets. Get them some food so they've got something to get them through those life's difficulties. This is the perfect time to do that, because the holiday season is a time of giving, and what a better gift to give than the gift of self-sufficiency. Help them be self-reliant, help them be self-sufficient, so that you don't have to stress over them, and that your resources can actually go longer because you're helping them as well. So put that in as part of your plan. Focus on the people around you, the ones that are on the same page as you, that are thinking about the same things, so that you're both moving forward together. Now, we're running into a break again. We've got our sponsor. Thank you, Survival Medical. They'll be at the Southtown Expo Center this Saturday and Sunday at the gun show. Check them out. That's what I carry in my bags. That's what I put in my with my food storage, is the Survival Medical Alpha Bucket. Check it out today at survival-medical.com, and we'll be right back after this break. Hey, welcome back to Prepper Talk Radio. It's Wednesday. We're almost out of time today. We've got about 20 more minutes. We're talking about the basics of preparedness with the P's of preparedness. We actually have a caller, so let's bring him on the line. Hey, thanks for calling K-Talk. You're on the air.
Hi, good morning. I love your show. You're full of great information. I wanted to mention a couple of small things that are really necessary things, and that's needle and thread, tape, good glue, and patch, repair, make things do when you're not able to get more. And preparing your thread, if you have a piece of paraffin or even a crayon that you wind, or you pull your thread through the wax before you sew, will strengthen your thread.
Brilliant. I'm actually glad you brought that up. What do you do to make sure you've got one of those with you whenever you need it? Do you have like a little kit that you put together, or what did you do?
You know those little tiny cookie tins that you get around Christmas time? With like Danish butter cookies and things like that. Mm-hmm. Like I have a little Danish butter cookie container right here in my kitchen right now that I'm going to make up for one of my kids. And it's about 1.5 inches high and 6 inches around. Square would make me happier. But I take a produce bag. They sell the produce in those they're red mesh, orange mesh bags.
Yeah.
And you can tie a knot in the end and then slip this metal container right in the mesh bag and put a clip on it, and it doesn't have to go anything. It can clip right to your belt, your backpack, or whatever, and the lid is secure and tight and waterproof. And you can stuff buttons, patches, just a multitude of things in there, even a little bag of waxed fire starter, or not like cotton with paraffin or Vaseline on it. Just a whole separate bag. It's fun, it's easy, and it might serve you well, and a whistle.
That's awesome. It's one of the most overlooked thoughts. Well, the most overlooked thing in preparedness is sanitation, but I think second to that is sewing, clothing repair, because when we do have a problem, where are we going to go? Especially if it's a grid down scenario, who's going to be able to fix the hem in your pants that you ripped, or fix, the buttons that you've popped off? If we don't have,
even your shoe.
Yeah, I keep a shoe repair kit, that squeeze bottle stuff that you can actually fill holes in your shoes, and you actually can make new tread. I keep that with my emergency kits, and I've actually used that when I went on vacation. We went to Massachusetts, and my shoe was kind of wearing a little bit of a hole. I ended up ripping off part of my shoe while I was in Massachusetts, but I'd had that tube, and overnight I was able to fix the sole, let it dry, and I was able to finish the trip without having to buy another pair of shoes, and saved myself about, I don't know, $80 on a new pair of shoes. Didn't have to buy another pair of shoes for another 6 months.
There you go. It made you happy, didn't it?
Absolutely. But it's funny that you talk about those cookie tins. Growing up, my grandma had those, and I always thought, oh, cookies, and I'd go for them, open them up, and it was always needle, thread, patch kits, buttons. So I think that's one of the best ways you can keep all that. It's ultralight. It's easy to store. You're right. It'd be great if they were square. But I think buttons, everybody needs more buttons in there. People forget about buttons. Mm-hmm. If you run out of buttons, how are you going to keep fixing your clothes?
Right, and even if your zipper stops working, you can still on a button and make an oriental loop kind of thing that would still close your jacket or whatever without the zipper. You could still use it. And I said there was one more thing I wanted to mention. I've forgotten it. Anyway, I love your show, and thank you very much.
Hey, thank you so much for calling. We really appreciate you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. I think she made another good point about the paraffin wax. That's great, or a crayon. That's great to have because that can help you prep your thread for when you're sewing. It makes it a lot easier to repair an item when your thread's prepped appropriately. But you just slide your thread through it. Another thing you can use that for is if your zipper's having problems, you can wax your zipper. That'll allow it to glide and connect a little bit easier and a little bit better. So that can take and fix a lot of the problems you're having with zippers as you go. Thank you so much for that call. That's actually really, really a great point. So that goes back to the pack rat conversation. Make sure you're storing the things that you're going to need. Make sure you're storing the tools that you're going to need. And a great resource is for this type of thing. There's a lot of bloggers that talk about this. Go to Pinterest. It sounds, for lack of a better term, a little girly, but Pinterest is one of the best resources for preparedness and survival because you can find boards like PrepperCon, Two Moms the blog. I mean, they've got a lot of really good preparedness and survival pins on those pages that give you ideas of what you can do and tools and a breakdown of how to build those things so that you're a little bit better prepared. The next point I wanted to talk about before we run out of time is sanitation, or in the list of P's, poop. You do not want your poop or your pee near where you're living. If the sewage backs up, if something happens, maybe we have a grid down scenario or an earthquake, you're going to need to find an alternative solution to take care of that. And one of the easiest, simplest ways is an outhouse. Now, you may not have time to go build an outhouse in your backyard, but you can put up a couple tarps to create a semi-private location. But make sure it's downhill and away from the home. And if you go to our Pinterest page, you'll see we've got quite a few of those items pinned. But the beautiful thing about it is I love, if you go to Emergency Essentials, they've got the little buckets. And in the bucket, they've got a little mixture that helps clear and kill and eat the bacteria that's in your feces. Get a lot of that. Because even if in the middle of the winter, if you're like, I am not going outside, you can at least use this, put it in the bathroom, use it in the bathroom. Don't use your toilet. Don't try to flush anything down the toilet because it's going to be all backed up and it's going to just keep causing a bigger problem. And try to get all your neighbors to stop doing that as well in a disaster scenario, because that's just creating more bacteria that you're going to have to fight. But make sure you've got your solution. These buckets, I love them. We've got 3 of them in our house just in case. And that way our basement renters have something if they need it. But we've got a backup plan to our backup plan. Get yours. Make sure you've got your plan put together. But the last topic I want to talk about is, as we call it, policing or the pew-pew process, which is pew-pew. If you've watched Star Wars, everyone talks about Han Solo and who shot first. Pew-pew shooting, right? Home defense, self-defense. What are you doing to secure your home? One of the most simplest things for someone to do to break into your house is to simply kick down your door, because your latch on your door is only connected by about a 3/4 inch screw. It doesn't go into the frame, it just goes into the door frame, not the actual frame of your home. So that can be broken, kicked out quite easily. The only thing holding it there is less than an inch of wood. Now, if you really want to secure your house, pull those out, add at least a 2.5-inch screw that goes all the way into the frame. Really secure that door. Add additional locks up top and down bottom. That way there's no way someone can just kick through that door. And I also want you to think about windows. Yeah, somebody can break through a window, but that sound, that noise, that kind of lets people know they're there. And if you're home, you can defend against that. So I would highly recommend you get a group like Ready Man. They do home defense training. There's also the Urban Survivalist group. They do some training up north near Ogden, up in Clinton. Check those two groups out because they can help you with better ways you can prepare and protect your home. I highly recommend, if you're going to go the alternative to get a gun, or if you already have guns, that you don't just think you're commando and can take care of things. Get some training from some professionals. I love the guys down at the Armory. They do a great job. They've got some simulation systems you can go through, but pretty much any range you go to has training classes. Check out their courses, find out what they offer. They will offer something in your world that you're looking for, so check those out. And the nice thing about the Armory is you can do with a simulated round, so you're not actually shooting anything, you're not wasting a lot of ammunition. You can use their laser targeting system, and it's got a bunch of different scenarios you can go through. Everything from close quarter combat to larger distance training. Same thing with Ready Man. They can do that for you as well. And if you go to readyman.com, check out their website. They've got a lot of good resources. And then urbansurvivors.com, check out their website. They've got a lot of good resources. And they've got classes every Wednesday night on close quarter combat, how to defend against a personal attacker, whether they're in your home or whether it's a parking garage. Maybe you're just walking to your car in the middle of the night and it's dark and you look like a victim. These guys have some great resources to help you be better defended, better protected. Because in an emergency situation, it can take 15, 20 minutes for police to respond, all the way up to 3 or 4 days, depending on the severity of the situation. You cannot count on the emergency responders to be your first line of defense. Unfortunately, they'll be way too busy. So you need to make sure you can defend yourself and protect yourself and your family. And the best way to do that is to start simply. Just reinforce the things at home that you can reinforce. Get the double paned windows. They're a little bit stronger. They're a little bit harder to get through. Make sure that you have appropriately functioning latches, that all the windows lock and they stay locked. They don't break. Make sure that they all slide well. So get those serviced every couple of years to make sure that they function correctly and that there's nothing broken, because anything that's broken makes it easier for somebody to get into your house. Lastly, the thing I want to talk about is we've got just Halloween just happened, so we've got just a whole bunch of candy in your homes. And I love candy. So here's the thing I want you to make sure you're doing with your kids and your candy. Number one, first and foremost, take it away from them and give it all to me. I'm just kidding. Go through their candy, make sure nothing's suspicious if you haven't already done so. Make sure that the candy that you do have in the home is not going to be an allergen for those kids. Make sure you've gone through that so that those kids are protected. And then keep it away from them so they're only eating a little bit every day. You don't want your kid having sugar spikes, because that causes other additional problems. Most oftentimes, rambunctiousness, which can end up, as it did for me as a kid, in bruises, broken bones, or lacerations. I've fallen into end tables from sugar highs as a kid, just being stupid. So make sure you're not letting your kid eat too much candy. My mom tried, but I was very mischievous, and I could climb up on top of the fridge and get the stuff down. So make sure you're being smart with your kids and their candy as well. Want to thank everyone that's called in today. We've had a fun show. A reminder to check out our new website, ktalkmedia.com, for all of our latest updates for the news, for the weather, and we've also got some exclusive content from Prepper Talk Radio there, as well as our other shows. The next show today that you're going to be listening to, get to participate in, is the Liberty Lineup. We love these guys. Today, I believe it's the Liberty Moms, and they're awesome. They have a great show every Wednesday, so stay with us. And thank you to our sponsors. First and foremost, Survival Medical. They are the toughest first aid kit out there. Tougher than nature, tougher than you, tougher than me. They've got a kit for everything that you could possibly be thinking about, and it's got a 20-year shelf life. It's amazing. They've created a system that actually keeps your your Band-Aids sticking and keeps your gels as gel. They don't powder up. They don't dry up. They stay functional. They stay feasible, and it'll still work in up to 20 years. Now, check them out this weekend. They're at the Crossroads of the West Gun Show at the Southtown Expo Center in Sandy, Utah. It's going to be open Saturday, and it's going to be open Sunday. And go check him out. Talk to John. Tell him K-Talk sent you, and he'll make sure he takes extra good care of you and get you all squared away. Now, as you're getting ready for the weekend, besides going to the gun show this weekend, I want you to take a few minutes with your family, and I want you to go over the P's of preparedness, and first and foremost, put together your family plan. Family plan for a fire, family plan for a flood, and family plan for an earthquake. Not just if everyone's at home, but also if everyone's at work or school, what is your family going to do to make sure everybody's safe and accounted for? Put it to paper, give everybody a copy, and then I want you to practice those over the next few weeks. Because if you're not practicing those, they're not ingrained into your mind and they're not ingrained into your child's mind, and you do not want a scenario where you can't find a loved one in a disaster. That would just be horrific. So make sure you're spending the time to do that, and you print it all out. Keep a copy everywhere. Post them. We had ours posted in the pantry. Open the cupboard door, and there it was all the time, staring me in the face right next to our cleaning list of what each chore was in the house. So keep a list of those handy. Keep those plans out and aware, and go over them as often as possible, because the failure to plan, the failure to take action now could be the reason that you get in trouble later. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the Prepper Talk Radio family and K-Talk family. We're out of here. Stay tuned for more from Liberty Lineup.